March 18, 2021, a man known as El Cholo, once a powerful cartel leader, was found wrapped in plastic on a park bench in Tlaquepaque. The sign pinned to his body simply read, "The Traitor," a warning to anyone who dared cross the Jalisco New Generation cartel. Here are 7 times gangs messed with the wrong cartels.
A man lies dead on the street. On a nearby corner, the remains of at least 2 men are dumped in plastic bags.
It started with a burning car near Acapulco's Plaza Senderos. Authorities found 5 other abandoned vehicles nearby. Then came the shock. 15 headless bodies, all men between 15 and 25, dumped like trash in a city once famous for golden beaches and movie stars. The message was clear. This was no normal drug violence. This was a declaration of war. The South Pacific Gang, a violent offshoot of the Beltran Leyva cartel, had controlled much of Acapulco's criminal underworld. But their grip was slipping. Internal power struggles weakened their ranks. The Sinaloa cartel, led by Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, saw an opening. The Sinaloa cartel moved in strategically, targeting local enforcer networks and corrupt officials. Their first warning came with those 15 bodies, the single largest decapitation event since Mexico's drug war began. Alongside the corpses, they left 3 handwritten notes, all signed El Chapo. The message wasn't just for the South Pacific Gang. It was directed at every criminal group challenging Sinaloa's dominance. Acapulco trembled. The city had seen cartel violence before, but nothing so public, so brutal. Residents went from fearing extortion to outright terror. The once bustling beaches emptied as tourists fled. Local businesses shut down early, if they opened at all.
This seaside resort, once famous as a honeymooner's paradise, now has a very different reputation.
Journalists who once covered celebrity sightings now reported on daily executions. Crime scenes became routine, and their work was overwhelming. The South Pacific Gang tried to push back. Their response came days later. 6 more bodies found in a minivan taxi, all shot in the head. But their power was fading. The Sinaloa cartel's resources were vast. Their network stretched far beyond Acapulco, allowing them to choke off supply lines and bribe key officials. The South Pacific Gang was just learning that they had messed with the wrong cartel. Media outlets reported the violence cautiously, careful to avoid the latest victims. But social media spreads every new atrocity instantly, creating an atmosphere of constant fear. Locals learned to recognize cartel convoys and knew when to disappear.
Some people here in Acapulco say they almost crave for the days when one single kingpin was in charge of the drug trade. They say that back then they did not feel the danger of the violence so close to their lives.
The war between cartels turned civilian neighborhoods into battle zones. Authorities struggled to respond. Security forces patrolled tourist zones. But the violence spread. For every criminal killed or captured, 2 more took their place. The city's once robust tourist industry withered, replaced by fear and uncertainty.
On the streets, police pat down bus passengers, searching for gang members and weapons.
Police checkpoints appeared everywhere. Officers frisked people on buses and in cars, searching for gang members and weapons. But the violence persisted, evolving with each new tactic. The Sinaloa cartel's strategy was clear: overwhelm the South Pacific Gang with violence and fear, control the city's drug markets, extortion rackets, and human trafficking routes. They exploited every weakness, turning former allies against each other. The bloodshed became routine. Bodies left with warning messages, public executions, disappearances. The city's identity changed forever. Acapulco, once a symbol of Mexican glamour, became known for violence and fear.
Places like Acapulco will remain a battleground, with no indication of who will ultimately win or when it will end.
As of today, the South Pacific Gang regrets ever picking a fight with one of Mexico's most notorious, powerful, and violent cartels. While this violence was shocking, a more dramatic uprising in the Mexican town of Texcaltitlan will completely blow your mind.
Lo que dejó 14 personas fallecidas, 11 presuntos delincuentes y 3 civiles, de acuerdo con un informe dado a conocer.
December 8, 2023 was the day Texcaltitlan snapped. Farmers, exhausted by months of extortion, grabbed whatever weapons they could find, machetes, hunting rifles, anything to fight back. Their target, the notorious La Familia Michoacana cartel, had held their town hostage for years. This was never about heroics. It was a gang of fed-up villagers fighting for survival. The cartel demanded payment for every single square meter of farmland. For these villagers, that meant paying to keep food on their tables while the criminal organization bled them dry. When they finally couldn't pay anymore, they decided that if they were going down, they'd take some of their oppressors with them.
A las 10 de la noche de este viernes 8 de diciembre, por la Secretaría de Seguridad Estatal. Adicionalmente, informaron que hay 4 personas lesionadas por proyectil de arma de fuego.
The confrontation started at dawn. It began as a tense standoff, but quickly exploded into violence. Gunfire echoed across fields as machetes clashed with assault rifles. It was chaos, desperate, brutal, and completely unexpected by the cartel. By the time daylight broke, 10 cartel members lay dead, many burned in their trucks, others hacked apart in the fields. The villagers paid a heavy price too. 4 of their own were killed, defending their homes and families.
Observa a los civiles cuando encapsulan a los hombres armados y los golpean con sus machetes, mientras que de fondo se escuchan detonaciones de armas de fuego. En otro clip se ve una camioneta y sus tripulantes calcinados.
The farmers' victory was short-lived, but in that moment, they sent a message that even the most ruthless cartel couldn't ignore. Unfortunately, the aftermath was immediate and severe. La Familia Michoacana quickly retaliated, kidnapping 14 villagers, including children and local police officers. Their demand was simple: hand over the leaders of the uprising, or the hostages would pay the price. State and federal forces poured into Texcaltitlan, trying to stabilize the situation. The government classified the villagers' actions as legitimate self-defense, a rare acknowledgement of the desperate circumstances many rural communities face. The village now lives in constant fear of further retaliation. Security forces maintain a permanent presence, but everyone knows the peace is fragile. The community's brave stance sparked a national conversation about rural resistance to cartel violence, but it also reminded everyone of the brutal reality faced by those who dare to fight back. The Texcaltitlan uprising was truly unprecedented, but it was also a warning. For every brave stand against organized crime, there's a heavy price to pay. The question remains, how many more communities will be pushed to this breaking point, and which cartel will they mess with next? As intense as this face-off was, it is nothing compared to what happened in this next story. One gang in Guanajuato goes up against one of the most powerful cartels in North America. December 2017, the spark of war flares as Jose Antonio Yepes Ortiz, better known as El Marro, stands before a sea of armed men in rural Guanajuato. His voice cuts through the cold air, defiant and proud, as he proclaims,
"Soy Santa Rosa," marking the birth of the Santa Rosa de Lima cartel's greatest stand.
This isn't just a show of force. It's a direct challenge to the most powerful cartel in Mexico. What happened next shocked everyone in Mexico. El Marro built his empire by tapping into Mexico's fuel pipelines, stealing millions daily from the government-owned refineries. His home base, Santa Rosa de Lima, became the hub for a criminal organization that controlled vast swaths of Guanajuato. But his true rival loomed much larger: Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, El Mencho, leader of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG, a syndicate spanning 24 of Mexico's 32 states. CJNG offered El Marro a deal: keep his lucrative fuel theft operations, but allow their drug shipments safe passage through Guanajuato. El Marro refused. Instead, his men ambushed and killed El Mencho's nephew at a coffee shop in Irapuato. The blood had barely dried when El Marro released a video railing against CJNG and daring them to enter his territory. That public challenge was the spark. CJNG responded with overwhelming force, launching attacks on Santa Rosa de Lima strongholds across Guanajuato. Towns once known for art and industry became war zones. Shootouts erupted in restaurants, on highways, and in homes. The death toll skyrocketed as both sides fought for control. The government's efforts to restore order only fueled the fire. In March 2019, a massive operation targeted El Maro's compound. He escaped through a network of tunnels, but authorities seized properties and arrested dozens of his men. CJNG escalated their attacks, targeting not just rivals, but anyone suspected of supporting Santa Rosa de Lima. Police officers became frequent targets, more than 180 killed since 2018. The violence spread like wildfire, consuming the state. The violence reached a horrific peak on July 1, 2020, when gunmen stormed a drug rehab center in Irapuato, killing 27 people. The massacre wasn't just gang-on-gang violence, it was a message. Weeks later, CJNG released a video surrounded by armored trucks and heavily armed men, declaring that El Maro's days were numbered. The war claimed thousands of lives, turning Guanajuato from one of Mexico's safest states into one of its deadliest. By 2020, the state recorded 3,540 killings, a threefold increase in just 4 years. Entire communities lived in fear, caught between cartel violence and government crackdowns. In early 2020, the noose tightened around El Maro. His sister was murdered at her own wedding. His wife was arrested, and his financial networks were dismantled. CJNG's grip tightened as they eliminated his support system piece by piece. At the end, the most obvious lesson was that El Maro's gang had messed with the wrong cartel. But El Maro isn't alone. In the next story, a once powerful cartel leader is found dead and wrapped in plastic after an encounter with CJNG.
Por medio de redes sociales, circula un video, donde aparece un hombre que se identifica como el Cholo, acompañado de 6 sujetos armados con el rostro cubierto.
March 18, 2021. The man seated in that plastic chair was once one of Mexico's most powerful cartel leaders, now surrounded by masked gunmen. Carlos Enrique Sanchez, better known as El Cholo, faces his final moments. This isn't just a confession, it's the end of a brutal chapter in Mexico's cartel wars. El Cholo's story begins as a trusted lieutenant of El Mencho, the CJNG's ruthless leader. Together they built one of Mexico's most feared criminal empires. But in 2017, everything changed. El Cholo ordered the murder of El Colombiano, a key CJNG financial operator. That single act sparked a war that would tear Guadalajara apart. The split was immediate and violent. El Cholo broke away, forming his own organization, the Nueva Plaza Cartel. Backed by the powerful Sinaloa cartel, he aimed to carve out his own territory in Guadalajara. The city became a battleground, with both sides fighting for control of drug routes, extortion rackets, and street-level operations. At first, Nueva Plaza focused on local crimes, car thefts, phone extortion, small-scale drug sales. But their ambitions quickly grew. The conflict intensified, turning Guadalajara's quiet neighborhoods into war zones. By July 2018, the city recorded 13 cartel-related murders in just 1 week. El Cholo's defection triggered an immediate response from CJNG. El Mencho sent hit squads to eliminate his former ally, but El Cholo struck first. His men ambushed and killed the CJNG's lead assassin before he could complete his mission. Both sides used brutal tactics to send messages. In May 2018, after a failed attempt on the former Attorney General's life, CJNG launched 3 narco bloqueos, setting public buses on fire to block key Nueva Plaza territories. The violence spilled into every corner of city life. As the war raged, El Cholo tried to build alliances. He reportedly met with Omar Garcia Harfuch, then Mexico City's chief of police, seeking official support against CJNG. Harfuch denied the claims, but rumors of government corruption and rival cartel involvement swirled. The Sinaloa cartel, once dominant in Guadalajara, saw an opportunity. They allegedly funneled money and weapons to Nueva Plaza, hoping to weaken their mutual enemy. But the alliance was fragile. Nueva Plaza's members were mostly former CJNG foot soldiers, loyal only to whoever paid best. The violence reached new heights in 2020. Cartel gunmen attacked Mexico City's police chief in broad daylight, leaving him seriously wounded. El Cholo's organization claimed responsibility, further escalating the conflict. By early 2021, the body count in Jalisco soared to 494 deaths in just 2 months. Cartel gunmen targeted public officials, rival dealers, and anyone who crossed their path. The city lived in constant fear, caught between two warring criminal empires.
Igual le di la orden a Marino para que matara a las 11 personas que fue hace poco en ahí en la colonia La Jauja. Todo el desmadre que se vio pues fue por órdenes mías, pero para que Harfush me apoyaran todos.
That was El Cholo in his final recorded statement, admitting to ordering 11 assassinations in Tonalá and surrounding municipalities. He also confesses to orchestrating a grenade attack on the American consulate in Guadalajara, actions he claims were meant to prove his relevance to powerful allies.
Igual yo mandé a aventar la granada ahí al consulado americano para que se desintegrara toda la ciudad.
But his confession wasn't just about his crimes. El Cholo names two senior police officials, L03 Mario Alberto and L02 Zambrano, as his key supporters. The implication is clear. Corruption runs deep in Guadalajara's institutions. As CJNG closed in, El Cholo issued a final warning to his followers. He tells them to abandon the cartel life and focus on their families, a rare moment of reflection from a man responsible for so much bloodshed.
Ustedes muchachos, los pocos, muchos que sean los que queden apoyándome, pues déjense de cosas y dedíquense a la familia mejor. Es como que veo yo.
But this was probably inevitable for a man who had the guts to go against Mexico's most powerful cartel. On March 18, 2021, authorities found his body wrapped in plastic on a park bench in Tlaquepaque, two knives pinned assigned to his corpse. The traitor, El Cholo. It was a brutal message from CJNG to anyone considering defection. El Cholo's death marked the end of Nueva Plaza's challenge. The organization quickly fractured without its leader. Some members returned to CJNG, while others faded into the criminal underworld. The Sinaloa alliance collapsed, leaving Nueva Plaza a shadow of its former strength. But CJNG's victory came at a cost. The war had exposed deep corruption in Guadalajara's police force. Up to 30% of officers were compromised. The city's security institutions were left in disarray, struggling to regain control. Today, Guadalajara remains a contested territory. CJNG holds most of its former power, but new rivals constantly emerge. The cycle of violence continues, fueled by endless drug money and shifting alliances. This was a remarkable story in the history of cartels and gang violence, but it doesn't come close to the sheer level of violence in the next story. This one goes international.
And now moving to Latin America, Chiapas has transformed into a hotbed of violence in Mexico, with drug cartels, militias, and armed groups wreaking havoc in the once tranquil southernmost state.
Chiapas, Mexico, where the southern border meets Guatemala. What once was a tranquil region, known for its rich culture and ancient ruins, has now become ground zero in a brutal cartel turf war. The main players in this deadly conflict, the Sinaloa Cartel, one of Mexico's most powerful criminal organizations, and a local gang known as the Chiapas and Guatemala Group. This isn't just about drugs. It's about strategic control of key migration and trafficking routes that run through the region. The heart of the conflict lies in controlling these lucrative corridors, allowing whoever dominates them to establish a chokehold on drug smuggling and human trafficking into the United States. The violence reached a breaking point in July 2024. That's when at least 19 bodies were discovered in and around a dump truck near the town of La Concordia. The victims, 6 Guatemalans, were gunned down. This wasn't random violence. These were casualties of the escalating battle for territorial dominance.
A viral video featuring a tangle of bloodied bodies lying in a dump truck is making rounds in Mexico. Officials say these are the victims of a gunfight between Guatemala's Jalisco gang and Mexico's powerful Sinaloa cartel.
The Chiapas and Guatemala gang, once a local operation, thought they could push into Sinaloa territory. But they underestimated the Sinaloa cartel's resolve and firepower. The result? A series of ruthless attacks, including mass executions and widespread intimidation. The violence quickly spilled over to civilians, with entire villages caught in the crossfire. President López Obrador even acknowledged the crisis, pointing out that this isn't just about drugs, but it's also the human trafficking that's fueling the violence.
Son dos grupos.
There are two groups. What motivates this? Well, drug trafficking and also migrant trafficking. In other words, human smuggling.
Chiapas' location makes it crucial for smuggling operations. The dense jungles and winding rivers provide perfect cover for clandestine activities.
It has drawn the cartels to the scenic zone of jungles, mountains, and rivers, driving out scores of people from their homes.
But this isn't just a gangster turf war. It's also a humanitarian disaster. Over 500 Mexican have fled to Guatemala, many carrying only what they could on their backs. Entire communities have been displaced, with temporary shelters popping up across the border.
I was born here. My grandparents are here. My parents are here. They are buried here. But we have to leave because there is no life. Honestly, it makes me sad.
The Mexican government responded by deploying additional troops to the region. Military convoys now patrol key areas trying to restore order, but residents remain skeptical. Time and time again, federal forces arrive, push back the cartels, only to see them return stronger once the military withdraws. The situation has even impacted local politics. Cartel violence disrupted elections, with attacks on mayoral candidates and threats against polling stations. The region now lives in constant fear. One wrong move could mean becoming the next target. For now, the Sinaloa cartel maintains a brutal grip on the territory, showing the Chiapas and Guatemala gang that they still have full control. In the next case, another gang dares to challenge the Sinaloa cartel and meets deadlier consequences.
Mexican authorities say they have, quote, restored order in parts of the state of Chihuahua where organized criminal gangs engaged in violent confrontations in the past few days.
The battle lines in Chihuahua have never been clearer. On one side, La Linea, a fierce enforcer group born from former police, now fighting for control. On the other side, the powerful Sinaloa cartel is pushing deeper into rival territory. Their war is not just about drugs, it's about dominance over entire communities. La Linea, once the feared muscle for the Juarez cartel, is now a power in its own right. Born in the early 2000s, it grew from police corruption and quickly became notorious for brutal tactics. Massacres, car bombs, and public executions. Their specialty? Control through fear, enforced by violence that doesn't spare anyone. The Sinaloa cartel, often considered Mexico's most powerful drug organization, has been pushing into La Linea's stronghold in Ciudad Juarez since 2008. For years, both sides taxed shipments moving through the Juarez Valley. But now it's an all-out war for the vital smuggling corridors that connect Mexico to the United States. The violence escalated rapidly last year. Clashes erupted in key locations, Madera, Guachochi, and Coyame. Whole communities found themselves caught in the crossfire.
Police recovered 7 vehicles, 4 AR-15 and AK-47 style rifles, and a fragmentary grenade from 2 different crime scenes.
In one shocking incident, 5 rideshare drivers vanished, later found murdered. Their only crime was being in the wrong place at the wrong time, caught between the 2 warring factions. Businesses shuttered their doors and the streets grew emptier, except for heavily armed patrols from both sides. But the madness didn't stop there. In a bizarre twist, authorities found a wounded liger, a cross between a lion and tiger, abandoned in a house riddled with bullet holes. The home's human occupants had disappeared, presumed dead. The big cat became an unlikely symbol of the chaos engulfing Chihuahua. As the violence escalated, both sides brought heavier firepower. Police seized 50 caliber Barrett sniper rifles, military-style assault weapons, and even grenades from crime scenes. Convoys of armored vehicles became a common sight on rural roads. Each side tried to out-intimidate the other with displays of force. One notorious incident involved a severed Hia left near a chapel, a clear message to anyone who might resist. Even sacred spaces weren't safe from the violence.
A local priest taking to social media urging and begging for the violence in Chihuahua to end after a severed head was located near a chapel.
Priests and community leaders began making desperate pleas for peace, often from behind bullet-riddled walls. Law enforcement became targets too. La Linea started hunting state police officers. Retaliation for the firing of an entire municipal police force suspected of working with organized crime. Attacks on police became frequent, sometimes brazenly carried out in public places.
The criminal group that has been attacking the state police is a group known as La Linea. It's a group of local criminals that have been attacking us.
Despite official claims of restored order, the reality on the ground was different. Arrests were made, but for every captured gunman, 2 more seemed to appear. Convoys of armed men patrolled rural areas, enforcing cartel rule where the state couldn't reach. The battle spread to new fronts. The Sinaloa cartel's Salazar faction pushed into Sonora, trying to surround La Linea. Meanwhile, La Linea allegedly formed alliances with the Jalisco cartel New Generation, expanding their reach and resources. But the war took a heavy toll on local communities. Farmers couldn't plant crops safely. Families were forced to pay protection money to both sides. Schools closed, and entire towns became ghost towns overnight. Through it all, both sides tried to project strength. La Linea adopted the name New Juarez Cartel, while some members formed a splinter group called La Empresa. The Sinaloa cartel responded with even more aggressive tactics, trying to break the deadlock. As 2024 ended, the situation remained tense but unresolved. While both sides suffered heavy losses, the Sinaloa cartel has clearly maintained its large-scale dominance. The violence showed no signs of ending, only evolving into new forms of conflict. Sooner or later, La Linea would realize that they had messed with the wrong cartel. If you think we've had really shocking stories so far, then this last case will completely blow your mind. With a remarkably high death toll, a gang and an armed wing of the Sinaloa cartel clashed in Monterrey, Mexico.
The Zetas have moved in.
August 24th, 2011, Monterrey, Mexico. The city's heartbeat paused as a convoy of vehicles rolled up to Casino Royale. What happened next would leave 52 people dead and ignite one of the bloodiest chapters in Mexico's cartel wars. Gente Nueva, also known as Los Chiapas, is the armed wing of the Sinaloa cartel. Their primary function: to eliminate rivals and secure drug routes. But in 2011, they faced an enemy unlike any before: Los Zetas, a cartel infamous for its brutality and military tactics. The tension between these cartels had been simmering for years. Gente Nueva, under the command of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, had successfully pushed the Juarez cartel to the sidelines, consolidating Sinaloa's power in the north. But Los Zetas weren't just another cartel. They were former military special forces, bringing a new level of violence and organization to the drug war. The conflict reached a boiling point in Veracruz, a strategic smuggling corridor with a major Gulf port. Gente Nueva made a bold move, attempting to seize control of Zeta territory. September 20th, 2011, Boca del Rio, Veracruz. Rush hour brought traffic to a standstill as several vehicles blocked a major avenue. Gunmen abandoned 2 trucks in the middle of the highway, opening their gates to reveal 35 dead bodies. A clear message was left behind: no more extortions or murders of innocent people. This territory has a new proprietor. But this was just the beginning. The 2 trucks contained bodies of supposed Zetas members, but investigation later revealed only 6 had minor criminal records, and none were linked to organized crime. The true victims were innocent civilians, caught in the crossfire of a territorial war. What followed was a series of brutal exchanges, massacres, public executions, and retaliatory attacks. The violence escalated rapidly, forcing both cartels to unleash their full arsenal of terror tactics. Los Zetas responded with their trademark cruelty, while Gente Nueva countered with overwhelming force. The battle lines stretched across multiple states: Veracruz, Tamaulipas, Zacatecas, and Nuevo León. Each attack was more brazen than the last, targeting not just rivals, but anyone who stood in their way. Innocent civilians, journalists, and even military personnel became collateral damage in this war for control.
Monterrey used to be known as an industrial machine, the symbol of Mexico's economic opportunity, and it still is.
The violence wasn't limited to confrontations. Both cartels employed psychological warfare, public displays of bodies, threatening messages, and attacks on civilian targets. The goal was clear: establish dominance through fear and violence. As the body count rose, so did the stakes. Control of lucrative drug routes, ports, and strategic territories became the ultimate prize. The violence spread like wildfire, engulfing entire communities and forcing thousands to flee their homes. In the midst of this chaos, Gente Nueva proved its ruthlessness. They targeted Zeta operatives, safe houses, and logistical operations with surgical precision. Los Zetas responded with equal ferocity, unleashing attacks on Sinaloa cartel assets and supporters. But Gente Nueva had one advantage: financial resources. As the armed wing of the Sinaloa cartel, they had access to vast sums of money, allowing them to outspend and outgun their rivals. This financial muscle tipped the balance in their favor. The battle raged for months, leaving a trail of destruction across multiple states. Both cartels suffered heavy losses, but the violence showed no signs of slowing. Innocent lives were caught in the crossfire, while communities lived in constant fear of the next attack. Despite the violence, Gente Nueva's strategy paid off. They gradually gained control of key territories, pushing Los Zetas back and securing vital smuggling routes. The Sinaloa cartel's influence expanded, while the Zetas' power began to wane. But the victory came at a high cost. The violence between Gente Nueva and Los Zetas claimed thousands of lives and left entire communities devastated. The scars of this conflict remain visible today, a grim reminder of the price paid in the battle for cartel supremacy. As the dust settled, Gente Nueva solidified its dominance in key territories. Los Zetas, once feared as the most brutal cartel, found themselves pushed back and weakened. They had messed with the wrong cartel. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe to the channel to see more true crime.